The New York Giants, they're 2021. Oh man, where do you even start? Where do you even start with the Giants when it comes to their 2021? I guess you could start all the way back in 2016. Ever since they had that dreaded Bieber boat photo right before the 2016 wildcard game against the Green Bay Packers, things had gone completely south for the Blue G-men in New York. They had injury mania the following season that also included a Eli Manning benching from Ben McAdoo, which led to him getting fired, as well as the general manager, Jerry Reese. And then in 2018 and throughout 2019, they drafted Saquon Barkley at number 2 overall, and then at number 6 overall, they drafted Daniel Jones. And I know Giants fans are weren't pleased with that at all. And well, throughout those 2 years, it wouldn't result in anything new for the Giants. It would just result in more losing, especially with their second head coach, Pat Shurmur. Their second one since Tom Coughlin stepped down after the 2015 season. The then new general manager, Dave Gettleman, also traded away Odell Beckham Jr. during this time to the Cleveland Browns during the 2019 offseason, as well as letting Len Collins go to the Washington football team in free agency. And then Eli Manning also retired after the 2019 season, which was also yet another abject failure. So going into 2020, they had a little glimpse of hope, I guess, because, the Giants were playing in a really shitty NFC East. I say shitty because, the Cowboys were primed to completely dominate the division, but then week 5 came and Dak Prescott injured his leg against these same Giants. The Giants went 6-10. They were a game short of winning the division because, Washington beat the Eagles thanks to the Eagles tanking in that game. So they went 6-10, barely missing out on winning the division. Head coach Joe Judge, the third head coach in 5 years, seemed to have given them some net positives going into next season. So during this recent offseason last year, New York finally seemed primed to finally help Daniel Jones progress as a startable quarterback, because Daniel Jones throughout the years hasn't been good at all. He's been very bad with getting the ball out. He's also taken a lot of sacks, and his biggest problem, turnovers. So the Giants made a lot of moves throughout the offseason to help Daniel Jones progress. They got him an offensive line. They also got Kenny Golladay from Detroit in free agency, and then they drafted receiver Kadarius Toney in the first round. So the Giants seem poised to take at least a step forward in 2021. But then they get to the actual season. Injury mania ran wild again for the Giants all season long, primarily on the offensive side. I mean, nobody on offense would suffer, not many people on offense would suffer season-ending injuries, but when you look at the key pieces on offense that would be cornerstones, especially the ones that they signed, Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney would miss at least 3 games throughout the season. And then the pieces that were already there, Sterling Shepard, Saquon Barkley, and their quarterback, Daniel Jones, would also miss at least 3 games during the season. They would also lose their defensive captains, the linebacker Blake Martinez and safety Jabril Peppers. They would tear their ACLs in the first half of the season. And that the offensive line, even with the additions they made, it was still sucky. And they were made even more sucky when they lost Nick Gates, Matt Pert, Shane Lemieux. So that offensive line that was getting dealt with injuries, they became even shittier. So I will say this about the Giants: even with all the injuries that were happening, they just couldn't live up to the hype with all these offseason signings. The offense with Daniel Jones under center, they just couldn't find a rhythm. They just couldn't produce anything game-breaking. I mean, I guess with the exception of a Week 4 game against the New Orleans Saints, they just really couldn't get anything going. And then eventually, Jason Garrett, the offensive coordinator, he got fired in Week 13. In the air, Kenny Golladay was a disappointment. He didn't get a touchdown all season. Sterling Shepard, barely targeted by Daniel Jones and was frequently injured. Saquon Barkley was very inconsistent. And I guess the season-ending injuries in the last 2 years clearly impacted his running ability. So what also didn't help with the fact was the team was just the entire team was just completely sloppy, careless, and undisciplined. And Joe Judge didn't do anything to discipline them. He didn't do anything to mature them. So the Giants as a result, were one of the most penalized teams in football. So for all the talk that Joe Judge changed the culture in 2020, it surely didn't look that way in 2021. So things did get worse for New York. Like I mentioned, Daniel Jones was injured and missed some games in 2021, but where he specifically got injured was when he faced the Philadelphia Eagles in Week 12, and he sprained his neck. And it wasn't really clear where he sprained his neck, but that would just be the tipping point for the Giants' already terrible season. So you then get a rotating a quarterback community of Mike Glennon and Jake from State Farm. Yes, I kid you not. So you would just see throughout the rest of the season how bad the Giants are actually how worse the Giants are for somehow without Daniel Jones. So the Giants would score 10 points or less the rest of the way. Except for that one game against the LA Clippers. So sorry, the LA Chargers. So all in all, another season of disappointment for the Giants. Only this past year was just filled with so much more false hope, thanks to injuries and poor play that led to blowout city on a regular basis. Before I get into more shit, I guess there were at least a few highlights that they can take away from this god-awful season. Like, they got that overtime win against the New Orleans Saints, and in that game, probably the best game in the last 5 years, in an all-around team effort. Kadarius Toney, whenever he wasn't hurt, he was a key part of the offense. Was the preferred target, whoever was at quarterback, and defensive ends Dexter Lawrence and rookie Azeez Ojulari. They had a solid year up front on the defensive line, but still, they went 4-13. Another head coaching fire. Joe Judge got canned, and Dave Gettleman, in my opinion, saved face from getting fired by the Mara family. Retired. He retired. But again, in my opinion, he just wanted to save face from actually getting fired. So the Giants went on a head coaching search and a GM search. They hired Joe Chosen, I don't really know how to pronounce his name, as the general manager. Chosen was a key piece in drafting Josh Allen. And as for the head coaching position, they hired Brian Daboll, Josh Allen's former offensive coordinator. And Daboll was a key piece as well in developing Josh Allen into one of the elite quarterbacks that we see today in the NFL. Now, Daniel Jones is no Josh Allen, but we'll see how Daboll's able to at least try to make Daniel Jones into a somewhat decent quarterback. Man, that's gonna be a tall task for him. But lucky for Mr. Daboll, Daniel Jones, I think he's in a contract year. So this is Daniel Jones' literally last chance. This is his last chance to prove himself. If he doesn't get it done with Brian Daboll, he's not going to get another shot. He is literally not going to get another shot to start in the league. So it remains to be seen if Joe Chosen can sign the right players and, convince the key players to come to New York to play for the Giants. I know the New York is all the glitz and glamour with Times Square and Central Park, but the organization, yeah, it's suspect. So it remains to be seen what these new hires and Chosen and Daboll can bring to the table in the Big Apple. So going into the offseason, there are a lot of things that the Giants need to address, but the biggest things are the offensive line. An offensive line that can stay healthy for most of the season. I know it's going to be hard to find some, both in free agency and the draft, but man, for the last 2 years, the offensive line has been decimated by injuries. And whatever offensive line that Dave Gettleman invested in was producing negative results on the field. The signings that he had couldn't protect Daniel Jones at all. And Jones was frequently getting pressured into turnovers, or he was just taking a lot of hits. So the other thing that Shozin has to do is sign some backups as insurance for Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. And I say Saquon too because there's the chance that, well, he can get injured again. Let's keep in mind that Saquon hasn't had a fully healthy season. I think since his rookie year. I think that's his only fully healthy season. So when it comes to Daniel Jones, though, unless Shozin decides to make a big swing at quarterback via trade or free agency, again, there aren't really that big names all around. So Shozin has to find some insurance. It has to find an insurance policy in the event that Jones gets hurt again or underperforms. So the Giants overall, they're still a dumpster fire. But hiring Daboll as head coach, I guess it's a solid positive for the Mara family. So Brian Daboll's there now. But this is Daniel Jones. Like I said, it's his last chance to do at least a solid job. Now that he has a proven offensive coach in his ear and most of his offensive pieces returning. So the Giants ruled the judge out. The Joe Judge is out. They brought in the Daboll. Now, can they execute in 2022? That remains to be seen.